Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, the ocean's green gold, phytoplankton, algae, and other primary producers. Presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Melissa Silva. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. Over to you, Melissa.
Thank you, Rob. Hello, everyone. Very happy to be with you once again with another, I consider, very interesting webinar, very interesting topic. And my name is Melissa Silva, and the reason that I chose this time this topic, the primary producers of the ocean, is because I'm a marine biologist. So basically, my I remember my first contact with like actual, let's say, investigation in marine environment was a field work that we had in my college, in which we collected seaweed in a beach in Puerto Vallarta where I was studying. So I was just like thinking about my my experiences over there, and all of them have been very linked to this organism. So, I would like to share with you some of the facts that I know that I set up for you in this webinar. So let's get started. One thing that we have as a fact is that all living things need energy to live. You think about like how the things that we do as living beings, all of that requires energy. We call that energy food, but it's not necessarily the food that we have in our fridge or in our restaurant. So the energy that we need to have all our metabolism going on, or all of our bodies working, we can get them. In general, living things can get it in two ways. One is to take it from others, or the other one is to make your own energy. So those organisms that take the energy from others are called consumers. Basically, whatever you think about an animal, that is a consumer. If you think about, in this case, mushrooms, for example, they are consumers because they don't do the photosynthesis. They take the nutrients from the environment, and then the ones that make their own food, that are the technical name of that is autotroph. Those are the producers. And basically, when you think about producer, it's a plant. But not only plants are producers, we also have, like in this case, algae, phytoplankton, and some bacteria as well that are producers. In the ecosystem, in any given ecosystem, we have different levels, or different areas where each organism is set, depending on if they take the energy from others or if they make the energy. Those are called trophic levels. You can see right here. Let me just change this a little bit. I think that's better. You can see at the very base of this trophic pyramid, we have the primary producers, that are the plants, algae, that I already mentioned. And then from there on, we have consumers. Something that I found very interesting is that herbivores, those that are obligatory plant feeders, or primary producer feeders, those are called secondary producers because they are making food for carnivores. So we have the primary producers, that are plants, then the secondary producers or primary consumers, which are the herbivores, the ones that only feed on, let's say, plants in general, just to give a general name. And from there on, we will have the consumers as carnivores mostly. Um, Outside of these trophic levels, or in between those, we have the decomposers, bacteria, the fungi group, that they take the dead organic matter from others, and use them for their own energy and their own processes. but they recycle the nutrients. They give back the nutrients to the environment, and those nutrients are taken by the primary producers as well, and then the cycle starts all over. So just to have an example with more figures, a prettier one, the example in the ocean, the trophic levels in the ocean, seaweed, seagrass, phytoplankton is the primary consumers, primary producers. Above them, we have the primary consumers. In this case, for example, the zooplankton, that is also microscopic or very tiny animals living, floating in the ocean. We have fish that are feeding on these primary producers. We have mollusks that do the same, and then above them we have the first consumers, or in this case, if we take the herbivores as first consumers, would be the second. Here they call it intermediate predators because they are not like the top, the apex predator, but they are in between the food web. Um, so here, what I liked about this diagram is that it also shows the energy flow. So to put it in a simple way, the energy flow would be the amount of basically energy or biomass that you need in a certain level to have a certain quantity in the next level above, in terms of consumers in this case. Right here, the numbers. 1,000 pounds of primary producers will give us 1 pound of top predators. So very very simple, to have 1 pound fillet of a tuna fish, a fish fillet, 1 pound, you would need 1,000 pounds of seagrass or algae or phytoplankton. Why? Because it goes in between several other organisms before it gets to the bluefin tuna or the whatever fish you are eating, and basically you are missing certain energy with all the biological processes, mating, migration, and either looking for even looking for food also takes energy. So this is, I found this to be very interesting, and well, why we have this topic today, the importance of the primary producers in the ocean. Actually, about in some countries, about 60% of the animal protein that people get comes from the ocean. So just imagine that, kind of like all of their protein requirements rely in the biomass production of the ocean. So just for us to have an idea of the importance. So producers are both aquatic and terrestrial. We find them pretty much everywhere in the world, and what they have in common is that they make the photosynthesis. They take the energy from the sun with some inorganic compounds from the environment, in this case water, carbon dioxide, and process them in their bodies to make them well, sugar, in general terms sugars, and then release the oxygen to the environment, and then they can use these sugars in their bodies to grow and keep the life cycle. But the photosynthesis is not the only thing that primary producers utilize to make the living, the daily living. There's another process named chemosynthesis, and this occurs in areas where there's no enough um, organic compounds, inorganic compounds in the environment, or in this case, in the bottom of the ocean, in the very deep areas, we have the hydrothermal vents. Most of the chemosynthetic organisms are bacteria. So I won't go very deep on this because I have a webinar about that. I will mention later, but it explains better in the other webinar. Let's focus now on the producers that are in the water, and more specifically in the ocean water, in salt water. Basically, the marine producers, we can divide them in two, in plants and algae. Uh, Plants would be like the true plants, like plants that we know, trees and grass. And the algae are slightly different, and they can come in different presentations: microscopic, macroscopic, or some others are not even are bacteria, actually are called cyanobacteria. I will go a little bit on detail in a moment. So if we start, for example, from the shore to deeper waters, let me start with mangroves. The mangroves are basically trees. You take a tree from land and then make it adapted to brackish water or salty water, and then you have the mangrove. Once again, I won't talk about deeper information about this because I have another webinar about mangroves that goes in more detail on the characteristics and life cycles and species. But just for you to know, they are alophyte trees. That means that they are salt tolerant trees, and they are found mostly in tropical and some subtropical areas. So pretty much they like warmer waters rather than cold. Um, the one that I will go a little bit on deeper explanation is the seagrass. Seagrass, I'm pretty sure you have heard of it, you have seen it. Very, very common in shallow areas, in coastal areas where we have more light going in the water, because they are basically true plants. They need a lot of light to do the photosynthesis. So we have 60, 70 species of seagrass all around the world. You can see this is very amazing because we have them in very cold areas: Alaska, you can see Ireland, the southern part of Greenland. So these are very, very cold areas, and they can live over there as long as they have clear waters. Of course, as with many species, with many organisms in the world, their highest abundance and their highest diversity is near the equator, near the central part of our planet, where they have, of course, more sunlight, and they will have more opportunities to grow and to diversify. So, as you can see, once again, this area in the Indonesia area, Singapore, I think somewhere here. Those are the countries that they have the most or the highest um, numbers of the seagrasses, the highest diversity. If we go to the Americas, you can see in this area of North America, Central America, we have a lot of biodiversity, a lot of abundance in terms of species. Of course, I'm pretty sure, hopefully, you have gone to Florida Keys or this area of the Caribbean islands, or at least Cancun and Tulum areas in Mexico. So I'm pretty sure you have seen the seagrass meadows. And well, as the name says, seagrass, not a true grass, but very closely related to the true plants in land. Actually, in the fossil record, the scientists, researchers have seen that the seagrass evolved from a land plant. So there was certain land terrestrial plant that evolved nearby the water, the seawater, and eventually when they felt this opportunity where we call them niche, um, uh, they colonized the ocean water and they adapted to the water, is the seawater living. In general terms, they are more related to the gingers than to the actual grass. For example, the grass, the true grasses that we can have like very commonly in our minds are corn. Maize is a true grass. Is the sugar cane. Um, so those would be like the typical true grasses. These ones, if you remember, you have seen the ginger plants. They have kind of like a grassy, is the greasy leaves. They have this. root system that is kind of like flexible. So the seagrass is very similar to those. And as flowering plants, they do need pollinators. Most of the pollination occurs with the water currents, with the help of water, but there are certain animals that help them on the pollination process, on the reproduction process of seagrass. These three micrographs of on the top of the image, those are crustacean larvae, different species. So you can see in this one number is the letter A. They have we have this crustacean larva with pollen grains in the digestive tract, in the stomach, and then some other larvae have the pollen grains attached to their bodies, very much like the bees. If you think about that, it's like the bees covered with the pollen grains. The same here with the larva. This micrograph on the bottom is a polychaete larva. It's a worm, polychaete worm, and then you can see one pollen grain here, and then another one below or behind the polychaete. So what they do basically, most of these organisms are just like floating around before they grow in the water column. So eventually they land in a flower on the seagrass meadow, and then with the current they move to another flower, and then that's how they can help with the pollination. Something very I found to be very interesting. But nevertheless, they also seagrass can also reproduce asexually, just like terrestrial plants. If you make the comparison, if you take one piece of the grass, of the seagrass, and then you plant it like in the same area but away, they will be able to colonize and reproduce also. So for example, this helps them to cover more area when the conditions are not helpful to have the sexual reproduction. That would be if they don't have, for example, enough sunlight. If there is a patch of seagrass in one area that is getting darker for, uh, I don't know, maybe they built a deck, and then that sunlight is that shadow of the deck is just like getting letting less sunlight going into the water. They will expand with this asexual reproduction, and eventually when they have better conditions they will mate sexually. Of course, they have a very huge importance in terms of ecology. I'm pretty sure you already know some of those, because the common name of some of these species, for example, the turtle seagrass, that the name, you have it right there. It's one of the seagrasses that feeds sea turtles in the Atlantic coast, mostly here on the Caribbean. So they provide habitat, but not only for these reptiles. They can also act as nurseries. So we have, for example, seahorses, we have fish, any type of fish. In this case, we have a stingray, but you mentioned any type of fish, crustacean, a lot of shrimps and crabs. The little tiny larvae that we saw in the previous slides, those will go into this area, and this is pretty much as a shelter, is a refuge, and they can hide in between the leaves of the grass, so they avoid the predators. Other organisms, for example, the ones that are sessile, or the ones that have less motility, like this oyster, this bivalve, or the conch, the mollusks, they cannot move as fast as a swimming fish or a sea turtle, for example. So they will rely once again on the density of the seagrass bed to get protection, and of course to get the food that is available on the area. But not only is not only that importance in terms of ecology, we also have something that it's kind of like a new term, couple of decades, ecosystemic services. So those services are like activities or facts that we have that are helpful to the humans. So we need to see that in terms of benefit to the human, or to the urban areas around these ecosystems. The seagrass beds, the seagrass meadows, have very different ecosystemic services. I just choose these five because, well, I thought those will resume a little bit, make a summary of all of the others. But for example, we can have handcrafts, or we can use this grass as part of the construction in local communities, or traditional communities that are living near the seabed, the seagrass beds. For example, when they are building their homes by the coast, or just a shelter for when they are going out for fishing, they can get some of this grass and make the floor, or make an isolation from the sand right there on the coast. They don't need much. They won't uh, process it, because eventually they will move to other place, and then this will be used by the same environment. It will come back to the environment. Handcrafts, some of the people, I remember seeing some native people in Yucatan, if I remember correctly. I think it was Yucatan or Quintana Roo, but they were weaving weaving the the seagrass into fans, just for the moment. Like, it was so hot, and then they took some of the seagrass that was there on the shore. They were just making the fan for the moment, and that was it. So pretty much, if you process that a little bit more, you can have a handcraft that will improve their economy in a long term. Another ecosystemic service that is very important for the coastal communities, the uh, marine communities, and the humans that live by the coast, is the coastal protection that they offer, together with reef barriers, and together with the mangroves. The seagrass beds are important for diminishing the strength of the water, of the waves. So, for example, if we have a hurricane or a very strong current or wind that is coming into the coast. Let's say we have a city right there. I'm just thinking about like Cancun and Tulum, areas that are just like they're facing the ocean. If we don't have a protection barrier, which are mangroves, the seagrass, and then the coral reef, uh, all of the strength of the water and the wind will come directly into this construction, which we have already had that problem. If you remember some of the hurricanes, excuse me, they will, now that they hit very very hard, because we had a lack of protection. So in this case, the seagrass beds, the seagrass meadows, will help also to prevent all of this destruction. Then the water, they help to the water purification and the nutrient flow by acting as a filter. So if you have this, a lot of grass fibers, one next to the other, kind of like compact or healthy, they will capture a lot of the sediment that comes, or that is floating in the area, and they will either storage it as their tissues in their bodies, and of course that becomes food for the herbivores, but also they will release some of those nutrients transformed. They took the CO2, and then they release O2, or other subproducts, um, and they will add those to the water column, and other organisms will take those nutrients that are already processed and of an easier access. So they are important part of this nutrient flow. Um, before I go, before I go to the carbon sequestration, recreational activities. Well, you know, if you go to, once again, Tulum or the Florida Keys, or I don't know, somewhere on the Caribbean area. I'm just thinking like the ones I know. Uh, you can see the manatees, you can see the sea turtles, you can see several other species in this area, just like grazing or resting. Some of them I've seen sea turtles like sleeping on the like in between the seagrass. So well, those recreational activities that are not extractive, that are respectful, are very important for the coastal communities, for humans living on the coast, because well, you force the government and the people living there to protect the area, to keep it pristine or in good with good health, because well, you like what you are seeing. And once again, we come with one of the basic points of ecotourism. You are helping the people also in terms of economy. So the seagrass beds are very important for recreational activities. And what I think that is like the most important ecosystemic service that they provide for us is the carbon sequestration. Um, this is something that is called blue carbon, because well, blue of the ocean. The carbon sequestration of the seagrass is one of the most important, because they can take a lot of more or less one third of their total weight. They can take in CO2 numbers and transform it in a certain way that it can be used for other organisms, as I said, as part of their diet, or they can only storage it until they die and decay. But that's very important because well, we are now in this uh, climate crisis, but not only outside of the ocean, also the ocean is being affected by the acidification. There are higher amounts of CO2 dissolved in the seawater, so we need this type of environments to capture, to make the sequestration of the carbon and to storage it there for later use in a healthier way within the same environment. So, well, it's I should have a webinar about seagrass only because it's so deep, so important. But if you want to learn more and if you want to be part of projects of protection, investigation, go to this website. I found a lot of very interesting information, seagrasswatch.org. And well, you can learn like much more about seagrass and their importance. Let's talk about macroalgae, seaweed. This is a very nice photo that I like. This is a kelp forest. There are several different species of kelp. This is one of the most popular when you think about kelp, but well, all of them very important. So algae are not plants. They are not like the seagrass. They are very different. They belong to another kingdom of living organisms named protists. The difference between, in this case, seagrass and algae, is that the algae have simple structures. They don't have a complex body structure like seagrass, in which we can find roots, leaves, the rhizome that is like this horizontal root that connects the different sprouts. They don't have flowers. So basically, what they do is that they attach to hard structures in the bottom of the ocean, on the bottom of the ocean, or well, not the ocean, but it can be on the coast as well. Um, so, for example, they attach to rocks, to shells, to to crustacean shell or to mollusk shell. For example, crab. They can, when they die or whatever, they can get there, and that hard structure can be as a structure for the algae to start growing, to attach and start growing. This area that is the equivalent to the root on the seagrass is called the holdfast. and then the stipe, which is the equivalent to the stems. Then we have the blade, that is equivalent to the leaves of the seagrass. And the another also very interesting difference that these two organisms have is that the algae can make photosynthesis all of its body. So all of this, the cells that make that make the photosynthesis, that produce the food, are in all the body. They are distributed from the bottom to the top of the algae. Meanwhile, on the seagrass, you only have the photosynthetic cells on the leaves. So that kind of like makes the algae a little bit more efficient in producing food. I'm sorry. And since the algae has a simpler structure than the seagrass, they basically make their nutrition exchange via diffusion. So they don't really do like they don't make. I have to go into botany now. The plants, the real plants, have different systems. Pretty much the veins. If you remember the veins on the leaves, these little tiny tubes, they take the phloema and the xylema, the sap of the plants, up and down and around the plants, and they have specialized structures to move all of that sap, and to process all the nutrients and the excretes. And so with the algae, they don't do so. They don't have any of those veins, any of those tubes. So what they do is that they only make the absorption of and transportation of the nutrients by diffusion. If there is more a higher concentration of nutrients in one area of the algae, it will diffuse to the rest of the body until we have like an even amount of nutrient in all the body of the algae. So, well, still, even if they are not like true plants or they have simple structure, they are complex organisms, and one of the most important also in the ocean. Algae have deeper distribution than seagrass. They might not have like a wider distribution in the ocean, because they need to be attached, most of them, not all, they need to be attached to the bottom, but they can go in deeper areas. Most of the time seagrass will be found up to what, 50 meters more or less, as long as they have enough light on the water column, the penetration of light, they can survive. They can be different species of seagrass. But if we have darker waters, we will have a prevalence of seaweeds mostly. And then if you have an environment where you used to have most seagrass species, but then it gets darker because of, I don't know, pollution, or because of sediments floating in the water, making the water column darker, eventually the macroalgae will take over the seagrass, and they will colonize other areas that were not before, where they were not. So, well, they can be in deeper areas. Why? Because they have different adaptations. The seagrass, once again, is a plant. So basically they have to be where the sun, like direct sun, is. But the algae, they can adapt to darker environments because of the chlorophyll types, that chlorophyll types that they have. This is quite new for me. The green algae, they do have chlorophyll A and B, but they also have xanthophylls. So that allows them to be in a little bit darker environment. So not only on the shallow areas where the seagrass is, but also in a little bit deeper areas. Then the green algae group belongs to the class Chlorophyta. These are, well, we have used this for years, this division, taxonomic division, but with the new studies on biochemics and genetics and so, they have changed and they have made subdivisions and they have put together some others. So I just wanted to keep it very simple, but you can do your own research and see how this has been evolved. Green algae belong to chlorophyta, brown algae pheophyta, and the red algae to rhodophyta. Um, then the pheophyta, besides the chlorophyll A, they have chlorophyll C, fucoxanthins, and xanthophylls as well. So those allows them to be once again in deeper environments and also the cooler environments. The green algae are found mostly on temperate, warmer waters. They can be found also in cold waters, but they don't thrive as well as in the others. And the red algae have mostly chlorophyll D and phycobilin. Okay, so that's what gives them the reddish color as well. In this diagram, we are seeing the different groups according to the depth and the light availability. So the deeper it is in the water, we find redder algae, and then the same with the decrease of light, because of the light waves that go deeper. The red light wave goes deeper than the blue and the green. So that's why we have those. So red algae, as I mentioned, they thrive more like in temperate waters, deeper waters, and they are found mostly in tropical and subtropical areas. Some species of the red algae belong to the coral reef area because they can storage or make like this shell, let's say, hard carbonate structure around their bodies, like this species, Corallina officinalis, and they are part of the construction of this reef ecosystem. From the red algae, from certain species of red algae, we can get the agar, which is kind of like a gelatin powder, very important in the food industry and in the research industry. Excuse me, if you remember your science classes, if you took a science class in school, the petri dish where you had the gelatin, that is the agar, where you had like the bacteria colonies and stuff. Excuse me. Mm, and then the nori algae is actually a red algae. It is processed, and then, well, we can have it in the delicious sushi. The brown algae is also brown because most of the species that are within this group are brown, but they can go from olive, dark olive green to pure like brown color. They thrive better in colder waters. They are found only in the seawater, in salt water, in the ocean, and some of them are also edible. But what this group has in specific and in difference of the others is that they present these floating structures named pneumatocysts. Uh, these are basically structures that are inflated and they accumulate gas. I think it is CO2. Um, so what they do is that they help the plant, well, the algae, to be erect, to be floating, and so they can reach the sunlight and they can compete with the green algae. One that is very common, the kelp forest that I mentioned, they have these pneumatocysts in their body, so that's why we have these huge structures reaching the surface. There are different species of kelp. This one here, for example, is a kelp, despite it is mostly like a stem, and then uh, just like a piece of algae on the top of the stem. So we can find that mostly in California, Nereocystis lutkana. And the other one that is super famous and uh, for not for the best reason, the sargassum. Sargassum seaweed, it's a brown algae, and they don't attach. They are free living or floating living algae, and well, you know already all the problematic with the sargassum on the Caribbean coast of Mexico and the Caribbean islands as well. And then green algae is quite a different. It should have another its own webinar also, because we have macroalgae within the green algae, but we also have a microscopic algae, and actually we have more microscopic green algae than macroscopic or big algae on this coloration, on this group, on the chlorophyta group. We can find them pretty much anywhere in the ocean, in freshwater environments, and even in moist environments. For example, that little um layer that is kind of slimy in your fish tanks and then turns a little bit greeny, that is green algae that is microscopic. So you can you don't see it that is in the water, but eventually when they accumulate, you can see that. Something that I found very interesting about the green algae is that there were some projects. I chose this one because it was very cool, very futuristic design. They want to make bioreactors, either to take gas, to produce gas like for like household use, or to sequestrate carbon dioxide. So this company, Hypergiant, made this bioreactor, and what they were saying is that one of these bioreactor of that fits in one room, pretty much like a smaller than a fridge, or the size of a medium sized fridge. They can this bioreactor, the algae in there can capture as much carbon dioxide as 400 trees. So just imagine that those set up in the in the homes or in public areas in cities, they can improve the air quality of the cities. So well, just to wrap up with the seaweeds, I found some other interesting facts. For example, the brown algae, they absorb, like in general in the world, only brown algae group, 1 billion ton of carbon per year. One third of that carbon they absorb, they make it bioavailable in the shape of sugars. Basically, they excrete the excess of carbon that they have in the organism as sugars that can be consumed by any primary predator, primary consumer that is in the area. And basically 1 gram of seaweed, any type, red, is the red, green, or brown, 1 gram of seaweed sequestrate or captures 2 grams of CO2. So this makes the seaweed the most efficient carbon dioxide sequestrator, because they basically take 200% of their biomass in carbon through their life cycle. And well, we're getting to the end of this. Phytoplankton, last but not the least, very important. Phytoplankton are microscopic organisms that are part of the planktonic community of the oceans. The planktonic community is very wide because the eggs from fish, the baby fish, the fries, if they are microscopic, baby jellyfish, the crustacea larva, all of those are part of the plankton community at a certain stage of their lives. If they are microscopic and they are floating around, moving with the currents, they become part of the planktonic community. So this little tiny image right here, you can see we can have a lot of polychaetes, you can see a shrimp, a jellyfish, blah, blah, blah. So all of those are planktonic elements. The autotrophic organisms, the ones that make their own food, is the one that is called phytoplankton. They can be found in any water body, fresh water, oceanic water, and once again in moist areas, for example, associated to lichens, associated to the moss in the forest, the humidity of the moss. So you can find these, since they are microscopic, pretty much they fit anywhere. The main groups of the phytoplankton community are the cyanobacteria, the diatoms, dinoflagellate, the green algae that I mentioned, and another one that deserves its own webinar, the coccolithophores. These structures here, these are from another world. I will do a webinar about that later. So phytoplankton is the base, is the main brick of the food pyramid in the ocean, because a lot of animals rely, a lot of consumers rely on them for their survival. The biggest fish in the world, the largest fish in the world, the whale shark, relies on the phytoplankton and the zooplankton as its food source. They might eat some tiny little fish, but most of the food is phytoplankton and zooplankton. So just for you to know, like, how important it is. So let me just go in a little bit of detail with the cyanobacteria, the dinoflagellate, and the diatoms. The cyanobacteria is also called blue-green algae, although they are not true algae. They are bacteria. They are archaeas. Those are like primitive microorganisms. Let's say if we have the protists and with the bacteria being very simple, then we have the cyanobacteria that are simpler. So these cyanobacteria are to be, scientists think they are one of the first living forms in the land, in the earth, in the planet. Before we had any dinosaur, any fossil that you might think of, we had cyanobacteria, and that's why, according to the scientific community, that's why we have now the oxygen available for the organisms that live nowadays. How we know that? They found these structures in certain areas of the world called stromatolites. This is fossil evidence of cyanobacteria that were growing in layers, one on top of the other, and these date back to 3.5 billion years ago. So supposedly, thanks to the cyanobacteria, we can breathe the air that we are breathing nowadays. Then the diatoms, these are also very pretty organisms. They have these symmetrical shapes that are very artistic, you can see. And they have these shapes because of the the silica walls that they have. The silica, the compound attached in certain crystal forms, so that makes them to have these is the symmetric shapes. They are part of something called marine snow. In one of my webinars, the hydrothermal vent webinars, I mentioned that this is very important food source for certain organisms that live in deeper areas of the ocean where there is no sunlight. So marine snow, a high amount of it is made out of diatoms. I'm sorry. And then the dead diatoms make a compound named diatomite, or I forgot the other name. Well, it is a compound made of the crushed silica cell walls, and it is used as an insecticide, as an agglutinant, as it has like 1,000 different uses. So make a little bit of the research on this specific compound and diatomite, and you will see how important it is for the industry, for the human industries that we have. And then another is the part of the phytoplankton, the dinoflagellates. Here, I'm focusing mostly on the photosynthetic because we have dinoflagellates that actually feed on other dinoflagellates that are consumers, like along around the same area, the phytoplankton, these microscopic organisms. So, well, they are characterized by presenting two flagella. I don't know if you can see in this image right here. They have a flagella and they are motile. They can be moving, but of course, being so small, they are moved farther distances by the action of currents. And unfortunately, these are the ones that caused this, together with some microscopic green algae, are the ones that cause the blooms that we call it, the red tide, or well, green tide or blue tide, depending on which organism is blooming. And if they are found in very high amounts, they can produce toxins, either cytolytic, hepatotoxics, or neurotoxic toxins. So usually, if you see a weird color in the ocean or in a lake, try not to go in the water because it can irritate your eyes or your nose. And if you are in an area where you see this kind of event, avoid eating local filter feedings. Those are oysters, local crustaceans like local lobster, the local fish, the local fisheries that are in the area, because pretty much they can have a bioaccumulation of those toxins and they can be harmful for humans. So why we have these blooms? Very quickly, I will go over this. We call those eutrophitic eutrophitic environments. That is just that there is such a large amount of nutrients that it is a frenzy in the reproduction of these microorganisms, of the dinoflagellate and the microalgae. So what happens here is that most of the time is because of the pollution that comes in rivers or on the coastline that gives these organisms a lot of nutrients and makes them reproduce faster than they are being consumed. So in this eutrophic ecosystem, we have a problem that comes not from the area, from the specific area, but from somewhere inland, actually. And another thing that affects, if we have like this eutrophic area, is that we lost the seagrass habitat. Because once again, if you remember, if we have a clear water, the seagrass will have enough energy for the photosynthesis. But then if we have this eutrophic area, there will be a lot of sediment floating, a lot of microorganisms covering the water column, and preventing the seagrass from growing. And I think that's it. Rob, I think we have some time, hopefully, for questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Now, before we start in with the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. So it seems like these algae and seagrasses are all lumped into being called seaweed. Is it all seaweed? Is there a true seaweed? Can you clarify that a little for us?
Yeah, seaweed is only the macroalgae. That would be it. In scientific terms, seaweed. If you are on the beach and you see seagrass and you see you can call it seaweed because, well, it's a weed that is in the sea. But to be very strict about this, seaweed is only the macroscopic algae.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. So, how can you know if an algae is poisonous or not?
Basically, none of them is poisonous. They will be poisonous if they are found in this amount, like this. If they are visible to the eye, they can be harmful. But for example, I mean, we eat the nori algae that I mentioned here. Well, this is not the nori, this is the wakame algae. So a lot of the macro algae are edible, and a lot of them are also used, for example, for spa treatments, for facials and massage. They can be used with a little bit of cleaning. They can be used in our bodies. We can consume them. But if we find something like this, like colorful water like this, very likely there's a certain amount of toxins that can either just like make some irritation on our skin or on our eyes. But if we eat animals that are in this area that consume those this other algae, that can be a little bit more dangerous.
So for humans to eat algae, does it need to be processed or cooked, or can you eat it raw?
In the traditional Asian cuisine, they consume the algae just slightly cook and pretty much just like washed. So they take it from the water from the ocean, they wash it. Sometimes they make it on kind of like a soak treatment on vinegar or sake or some, the traditional cuisine, and then you can eat it like that. um, this one, for example, the nori algae, what is it? See this one, the one that we use on the sushi, that is already processed because it was crushed, it was dried, and then it was formed into these squares for the sushi. So it's pretty much completely safe to eat it just like this. And well, I pretty much trust the traditional cuisine because they know how to uh, what treatment they should have before we eat them. So those those would be safe to eat.
Great, thank you for that. So,
Hmm.
is it true that the ocean was able to absorb a lot of the carbon dioxide in the air? And now that the oceans are warmer, are they still able to absorb as much, or is it becoming a problem?
Yeah, well, yeah, the ocean in general absorbs like 60%, 70, like these primary producers absorb in total, like all together, all these groups that I talk about, like 70% of the carbon dioxide on the environment, and of course release that same amount of oxygen. With the increase of the ocean temperature, what we have is that the the patches, if we talk about seagrass or seaweed, the patches of these organisms are being reduced. So, with obvious reasons, we have less organisms to capture carbon dioxide, and of course, those that died because of the climate, the environmental change, they are releasing the CO2 that or the carbon that they had storage in their body. So the problematic that we have nowadays is that we are losing habitat of these organisms, and that we are losing organisms per se because of the both acidification and pollution, and an increase on temperature of the ocean water. So yep, it's a little bit of a problem. um, Luckily for us, a lot of the primary producers, which is the phytoplankton, are all around the world. So if the currents are changing, they are moving with them, and they are getting to maybe better areas than the ones that are already here. But the sessiles, the ones that are attached to the bottom, such as seagrass and the seaweed, the algae, those are the ones that can face bigger problems if the ocean keeps warming up.
Great, thank you, Melissa. So, could you just remind us once again about how that red color comes to exist for the algae? How does it get red?
Hmm. So this red color comes from the dinoflagellates. The green ones will come most likely from green algae. But well, there are some dinoflagellates that can have like this greener coloration. Remember, all of these are microscopic organisms. So the red coloration comes from red colored dinoflagellates that are in uncountable amounts. It's millions and millions and millions per drop of water. So having this amount, of course, you will see the color in the color of the organisms. That's why we have blue tides. Well, I don't know if you have seen those, but we have like blue, like this blue, like artificial blue color in the water. We have the green ones, we have the red ones, and we can also have brown colors in the water when we have this exaggerate production of microorganisms. So that's why we have the red coloration in the water.
Great. Thank you for that, Melissa. Unfortunately, that is going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to throw it back to you for some closing comments.
So, well, of course, I have to promote myself. I have these two webinars that can complement a little bit on this because of the primary producers, the chemosynthetic bacteria and the mangroves. But besides that, just once again, I invite you all to keep in mind that we are part of the environment, that whatever we do back home is affecting other areas. In this case, I mention it because of those blooms, algae blooms. Those can be prevent since we are inland, from land, since we use natural fertilizers, for example, or other products that are affecting the ocean. uh, Everything is interconnected, so just keep in mind that in, well, make your own research. There's so much information that I didn't cover in this webinar that I would like you to have. But well, we have a coworker that likes to say, keep curious. So keep curious and keep in touch with nature. Thank you, Rob.
Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And if you want to check out some of Melissa's past webinars, head over to the website at nathab.com/webinars. We have all our past webinars right there. So I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in today. Now, if you're interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, give us a call at the number on your screen, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us Tuesday for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out next week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.